Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuranidhitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Vandehang Shri Guru Shri Yuta Parakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Ragunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvetam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitangscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Let me pull up. I have a keynote presentation today. Hare Krishna, Calvin Prabhu. Nice to see you. So share screen. Share, and then, oops. Oh. All right. Can everybody see my screen? Okay. Right.
Yes, Prabhu, it's very clear.
Okay.
Yep, good.
So thank you for joining us tonight. I hope everybody had a beautiful Sunday. Such a nice day out. And today we're going to be discussing Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 9, entitled The Most Confidential Knowledge. And we're going to be going over 3 verses, 10, 11, and 12. Just sticking with these 3 verses because there's really so much here that can be discussed, and trying to dive deeply into Srila Prabhupada's purports and understand these few verses, which Srila Prabhupada would quote these verses quite a lot. So I titled this section Glance, Creation, and Descent. And in today's section, we will discuss the material creation, incarnations of Krishna that manifest the creation, and those who are baffled by this, which can be us sometimes. And we'll discuss that, how we can be baffled and confused by Krishna's creation. So if everybody has their Bhagavad Gita as it is handy, and we can dive right into chapter 9, verse 10. Mayad yakshena prakriti suyate sa chara charam hetu nanena kaunteya jagad viparivartate. This material nature, which is one of my energies, is working under my direction, O son of Kunti, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. So if we go back, just for clarity's sake, on how Krishna in the beginning of this chapter, he talks about how he pervades this entire universe. By me in my unmanifested form, this entire universe is pervaded. All beings are in me, but I am not in them. And yet everything that is created does not rest in me. Behold my mystic opulence. Although I am the maintainer of all living entities, and although I am everywhere, I am not a part of this cosmic manifestation, for myself is the very source of creation. And so this is the Achintya Beta Beta Tattva, or where Krishna is speaking about the simultaneous oneness and difference of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and all of his energies, and how he is not a part of this creation because he is the source of the creation. And so he, in the beginning of our verses today, verse 10, Krishna is speaking about this material nature, which is one of his energies. It's working under his direction, producing all moving and non-moving beings. Under its rule, this manifestation is created and annihilated again and again. And if you have your Bhagavad Gita handy, we can read the purport, which is so deep. This purport is really quite clear. So Srila Prabhupada states, it is clearly stated here that the Supreme Lord, although aloof from all the activities of the material world, remains the Supreme Director. The Supreme Lord is the supreme will and the background of this material manifestation, but the management is being conducted by material nature. Krishna also states in Bhagavad Gita that of all the living entities in different forms and species, I am the Father. The Father gives seeds to the womb of the mother for the child, and similarly, the Supreme Lord, by his mere glance, injects all the living entities into the womb of material nature, and they come out in their different forms and species according to their last desires and activities. All these living entities, although born under the glance of the Supreme Lord, take their different bodies according to their past deeds and desires. So the Lord is not directly attached to this material creation. He simply glances over material nature. Material nature is thus activated and everything is created immediately. Because he glances over material nature, there is undoubtedly activity on the part of the Supreme Lord, but he has nothing to do with the manifestation of the material world directly. This example is given in the Smriti. When there is a fragrant flower before someone, the fragrance is touched by the smelling power of the person, yet the smelling and the flower are detached from one another. There's a similar connection between the material world and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, he has nothing to do with this material world, but he creates by his glance and ordains. In summary, material nature, without the superintendence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, cannot do anything. Yet the Supreme Personality is detached from all material activities. So now we'll explore this verse and purport a little more, because there's so much here. It's really deep. And when Krishna states that this material nature, which is one of his energies, is working under his direction, so these energies, to keep everything in context of the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 7, texts 4 and 5, Krishna speaks about his energies there. You could say, inferior energy and the superior energy. So the inferior energy, which is the material nature in its gross form. You could hear Krishna says, earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Altogether, these constitute my separated material energies. Besides these, O mighty armed Arjuna, there is another superior energy of mine, which comprises the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So very clearly, Krishna, who is the source of the material energy and the living entities, is stating that the energies like earth, water, fire, air, ether, even intelligence, mind, and false ego, it's dull matter. It can actually not be moved by itself. And we'll talk about this in a little bit. But the living entities, yayedam daryate jagat, they're exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. And so in today's verse, this material nature, under the direction of Krishna, produces all moving and non-moving beings. How does this happen? The Lord glances. So when the Lord glances, right, what does it mean that he glances and yet he's not directly has anything to do with the material energy? This can be a little baffling because we hear he's glancing. Well, how does he glance? So Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, and from him, he expands himself, and he expands himself in so many ways. But today we're going to focus on the Purusha avatars. On the screen, Purusha avatars, the incarnations of creation. And there's Mahavishnu, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, and Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. So Krishna himself is the supreme personality of Godhead, the summum bonum. And so all energies, all living entities are coming from him, but even he himself can expand himself so that he doesn't have to directly himself do anything. He can, he's omnipotent, omniscient, unlimited. And so he is kind of directly and indirectly. So let's explore this a little bit more. In this picture here, we see Atlas, right? The demigod from the Greek and Roman traditions, where he's holding the world on his back. And here we see how he's, you know, it's a burden on his shoulders and he's holding it up. And Srila Prabhupada would always point this out, that Krishna does not have to struggle. God, the supreme personality of Godhead, doesn't have to struggle. Just by desiring, automatically things happen, right? And Krishna is so unlimited that he could take the ocean and put it into a small drinking glass without changing the shape or the size of the ocean or the drinking glass. And we cannot understand it with our material minds, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So he's not directly responsible for the creation. The Supreme Personality of Godhead doesn't have to struggle to create. So Mahavishnu, the picture here of Mahavishnu, how all universes come out of Mahavishnu from his inhalation and then wind back in with his exhalation. So this is the first incarnation of God that directly deals with the material energy. Mahavishnu, it's stated that the entire material creation is like a cloud in the spiritual sky. So the spiritual sky is unlimited, and in this tiny corner, there's this cloud where Mahavishnu enters, and when he enters, he breathes in and out as he exhales, millions and billions of seemingly unlimited universes come out of Mahavishnu. And Mahavishnu, he glances at the material energy, and this is what starts the creation. So with his glance, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 5, Text 21, talks about this glance, that the Lord, who is the controller of all energies, thus creates by his own potency. He glances, and by that glance comes time, kala, the fate of all living entities, known as karma, and their particular nature for which they were created, svabhav, and he again merges them independently. So this is quite amazing to think about, that this is happening. This can be really a stretch for the brain and the mind to think about how there's so many different universes and that they're coming out of this personality. And this verse talking about time, karma, and the nature of the living entities, it's discussed about in the purport today of 9:10 Bhagavad Gita, how Krishna is stated to be the Father, and they come out in their different forms and species according to their last desires and activities. All these living entities, although born under the glance of the Supreme Lord, take their different bodies according to their past deeds and desires. So the Lord, he's actually reciprocating with the living entities. So as the creation takes place, then everything is wound up again into Mahavishnu, but he remembers all of the activities, the fate, and the nature of all the living entities. So when he creates again, then creation is going on. And Srila Prabhupada says in the purport to 2.5.21 that the creation of the material world, wherein the conditioned souls are allowed to act subordinately by the Supreme Lord, takes place again and again after being repeatedly annihilated. The material creation is something like a cloud in the unlimited sky. The real sky is the spiritual sky, eternally filled with the rays of the Brahma Jyoti, and a portion of this unlimited sky is covered by the Mahatattva cloud of the material creation, in which the conditioned souls who want to lord it against the will of the Lord are put into play as they desire, under the control of the Lord by the agency of his external energy. And there's an interesting discussion in Chaitanya Charitamrita about creation, keeping in line with today's verse, that nipples on a neck. Well, what does this mean? Material energy prakriti. So in Chaitanya Charitamrita, it talks about how because prakriti, or the material energy, is dull and inert, it cannot actually be the cause of the material world. So matter is dull and inert. It is not the cause of the material world. Many philosophers try to point this out, that the material world is just going on by itself, that it's in Vedic times, this is known as Sankhya philosophy, that the material energy is just going on by itself and it's eternal. But the Vedas actually point to something else, that no, actually material energy, it cannot actually be the cause of this material world. But Lord Krishna shows his mercy by infusing his energy into the dull, inert material nature. What is that energy? The living entities and time. Thus, Prakriti, by the energy of Lord Krishna, becomes the secondary cause, just as iron becomes red hot by the energy of fire. Therefore, Lord Krishna is the original cause of the cosmic manifestation. Prakriti is like the nipples on the neck of a goat, for they cannot give any milk. And why is this brought up? Because this is actually Aja Galastana, nipples on the neck of a goat. This is a philosophical logic phrase used in the Vedas and the teachings of Krishna. So the Maya aspect of material nature is the immediate cause of the cosmic manifestation, but it cannot be the real cause, for the original cause is Lord Narayan. Just as the original cause of an earthen pot is the potter, so the creator of the material world is the first Purusha incarnation, which is Mahavishnu. Lord Krishna is the creator, and Maya, or the material energy, only helps him as an instrument, just like the potter's wheel and other instruments, which are the instrumental causes of a pot. The first Purusha, or Mahavishnu, casts his glance at Maya from a distance, and thus he impregnates her with the seed of life in the form of the living entities. And here we have Aristotle's four causes. Those who have studied philosophy might know these, but there's the material cause, efficient cause, formal cause. And in these four causes, the two that we really focus on in Sanskrit is nimitta and upadana, the efficient cause and the material cause. So the material cause in creating this table is wood, and the efficient cause is carpentry or the carpenter. And so even in the Vedas, this is brought out, the efficient and material cause. So Krishna is the, just as it used the example of pottery, he's the potter, and the material energy or the material cause would then be clay. So this is the understanding that we have, that again, Krishna is saying that it's the material energy is working under his direction. So this material energy, again, is the material cause. Krishna is the efficient cause. And we'll go next to the second Purusha avatar. So within those universes that we saw coming out of Mahavishnu, and how he glances and impregnates the material energy, Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, the second expansion in the as of the Lord that creates the material world, he lies down within each individual universe. So all those millions and billions and trillions of universes in the material world, he expands himself as Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, lies within each individual universe, and Lord Brahma manifests from his navel. And who is Lord Brahma? He is the second creator. In Srimad Bhagavatam 2.10.3, and here's one of my favorite pictures, paintings of Lord Brahma. Such an amazing painting showing how the he even has sa re ga ma pa pani, the musical notes, the different manifestations of the Vedas and the Puranas, the different sages, even the different mental states that are created by Brahma. So the elementary creation of 16 atoms of matter, namely the 5 elements, fire, water, land, air, and sky, sound, form, taste, smell, and touch. And the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, skin, and mind is known as sarga, creation, whereas subsequent resultant interaction of the modes of material nature is called visarga. So there's a general creation by the Lord in his expansions of Mahavishnu and Garbhodakshay Vishnu, and then Brahma, the topmost manager of this material world, comes out of the navel of Garbhodakshay Vishnu and rests upon a lotus, and he is the secondary creator. And then finally, we have the super soul, God who manifests in each and every living entity's heart to remind them what their karma, their fate is, to remind them what their svabhav nature is, gives them knowledge, remembrance, forgetfulness, and is also the eternal witness and constant companion of all living entities. And even more, super soul, or this manifestation of God, is within every atom. And this is Kshirodakashayi Vishnu. So Krishna is the source of all energies and universes and brings about the creation, but he is not directly the creator. Is he completely aloof? Well, we've shown how the Vedas and the Bhagavad Gita and the scriptures give us the understanding that Krishna himself has nothing to do with the creation and universes directly, but through his expansions, he very much does have something to do with creation. So in the first purport of 9.10 in Bhagavad Gita, it is clearly stated here that the Supreme Lord, although aloof from all the activities of the material world, remains the supreme director. So this is very much clear that he's the material energy is working under the direction and being empowered by the Lord, because again, dull, inert matter cannot be the source of all creation. And we went over the efficient and material causes. And why does he create? Right? Why does he create this material world? This is a reasonable question for everybody to ask, that why not just make everyone perfect? Why not just have everybody go directly to the spiritual world? Why are we in this material world where we forget our spiritual selves and we think that we're this material body, and we go through so many stressful situations and we experience karma or fate in so many different ways? Well, Krishna wants true love. And so this is often stated how God is love. And love cannot be forced. Right? To really love somebody, if you force somebody to love you, is that true love? No, the person is just loving you because they're forced to. So Krishna creates to give everybody an opportunity to have free will and to understand the truth, but not by force, giving the living entities who want to experience separation from God a choice. So that's the power of love, is choice. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, chapter 1, verse 10, he creates to give all living entities a chance to perform bhakti devotional service. So it's stated that some living entities, they've performed bhakti, they've performed devotional service, but they haven't perfected bhakti. And so what happens? Those living entities get wound back up into Mahavishnu. When all those energies, all the different energies of this material world are wound back up into Mahavishnu, the living entities that have performed bhakti, they also get wound back up. And Krishna reciprocates with their bhakti, and he actually creates to give those living entities another chance to perform and perfect devotional service. So this is the reason for this material creation, is to give everyone a chance to perfect their human form of life. Now, after going through all of that and showing how Krishna is the source of all creation and the different incarnations, we then go to text 11 of Bhagavad Gita, as it is in chapter 9, that avajananti mam mudha manusham tanum ashritam param bhavam ajananto mama bhuta maheshwaram. Fools deride me when I descend in the human form. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. And so this is a very important verse. And there's so much that can be said about this. But I wanted to, after speaking so much philosophy, not to make anything dry, but to kind of keep it alive, we'll go to Krishna's pastimes. So here in this beautiful painting, we see Krishna, the beautiful calf, and how the cowherd boys and calves are dancing into the mouth of Aghasura, who was a great demon who was sent to Vrindavan to kill Krishna. And we know that Kamsa was destined to be killed by Krishna, so he had different friends who had mystic powers and they could take different forms, and they tried to kill Krishna in so many different ways. And so the cowherd boys, they saw this huge, gigantic cave, and they didn't know what exactly it was, but they just saw that, oh, this could be a cool place to play, and Krishna, he is supremely powerful, he'll take care of us, because Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And so when he descends in this human-like form, this is the supreme personality of Godhead coming down, and he's playing with friends, and he even kills great demons. And so Aghasura closes his mouth, and Krishna expands himself until Aghasura cannot breathe anymore, and he bursts out of the top of his skull. The prana, the life airs, cannot come out, and so he leaves his body. Krishna kills him. The demigods all applaud, and Lord Brahma, who we talked about before, who's the second creator, he is directly empowered by God to create. He sees Krishna kill Aghasura. Agha, who was such a powerful mystic that even the demigods, the managers of the universe, they were very afraid of him. And Krishna, very easily, he doesn't have to struggle. He's the Supreme Lord. He kills Aghasura. And Lord Brahma sees that after Krishna kills Agha, he sits down with his friends and he's acting like a human child. What's happening? They're sitting around Krishna and they're eating. They're taking some food, they're eating it themselves, and then they pass it to Krishna and say, oh, Krishna, you should taste this, it's so good. Whereas Lord Brahma, he doesn't know what to think, because God, he knows yagya bhuk, that when we offer our food, right, this is an important practice for us, is that before we eat anything, we first offer it to the Lord as a form of sacrifice to purify it. And when we offer, we say prayers, we ring a bell, and there's ritual that's involved. When you go to the temple, there's so many mantras that you have to perform. You have to do achaman and padi. You have to do all these things to offer the food to Krishna. And yet Brahma, he's the second creator. He's the first living entity in this material world. He's full of knowledge. He knows the 4 Vedas. He's bewildered. Is this the Supreme Personality of Godhead? Why is he acting like this? He becomes bewildered. So what does he do? He tries to test God. He takes away the cows. And the cows, they go missing. And Krishna says, I'll go find the cows. You just stay here and eat. And then as Krishna leaves, Brahma, he takes all of the cowherd boys away. He takes everything away from God, seemingly. But what does Krishna do? He understands what's happening. And he expands himself as all of the cowherd boys and all of the cows. And there's a very, very beautiful reason for this, is that in the spiritual world, all of the mothers, all of the cows, all of the fathers of the different cowherd boys and the calves, they all want to have this position of taking care of Krishna as if he were their own child. And so this is an opportunity, expanding himself as each of the cowherd boys and calves, to give his intimate associates the opportunity to really take care of Krishna. And so the cowherd boys that are actually Krishna, they go home, and the mothers and fathers are just wanting to take care of Krishna so much. They bathe their children and really take care of them. The cows and bulls do the same. And so in this way, they are taking care of Krishna. And after 1 year, Brahma comes back to see what has happened. He sees that all the cowherd boys are there. All the cows I took all of that away. And what's happening? And he sees Krishna, and what happens? There's this very beautiful painting of how Krishna reveals. He shows Brahma the truth. Here we have the cowherd boys, and they're all Vishnu themselves. They're actually all expansions of Krishna himself. And he reveals all of this to Brahma, and Brahma is just bewildered. I tried to test the Supreme Personality of Godhead because I couldn't understand him. Fools deride me when I descend to this world. They do not know my transcendental nature as the Supreme Lord of all that be. So here's the beauty of this Krishna conscious philosophy, is that we, on one hand, we have this beautiful philosophy showing step by step, and I left even a lot of steps out of how this creation takes place. And it goes into quite elaborate detail in Srimad Bhagavatam of how the creation takes place through Mahavishnu, Garbhodakshay Vishnu, Brahma. Even the secondary creation of Brahma is quite elaborate, but it's there to prove that Krishna is the source of everything. He's the summum bonum. He's the absolute truth. This is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And yet, he plays in such a way with his eternal associates to attract the hearts of all living entities, showing that you can have an intimate relationship with God. It doesn't have to be this, I'm here and there's God separate and he's the ultimate controller and there's always going to be this great distance. No, there's actually so many relationships that one can intimately have with God. And it's very beautiful. And Brahma, he didn't know what was going on because he couldn't understand who Krishna was. And so there's these very beautiful prayers of Brahma, very profound realizations that many people say they know everything about Krishna, but Brahma does not know everything. And he says, there are people who say, I know everything about Krishna. Let them think that way. As far as I am concerned, I do not wish to speak very much about this matter. Oh, my Lord, let me say this much. As far as your opulences are concerned, they're all beyond the reach of my mind, body, and words. And this is a very important point, that to try to understand spiritual matters with our mundane mind and intelligence, we're going to be baffled. We're not going to be able to fully understand. And so this is why Bhakti Yoga is a process where one doesn't completely throw out logic. We'll talk about that in a second. But most of it is how to surrender and have revelation and mercy enter into the heart. So in verse 12, the last verse that we'll discuss in Bhagavad Gita today, those who are thus bewildered are attracted by demonic and atheistic views. In that deluded condition, their hopes for liberation, their fruitive activities, and their culture of knowledge are all defeated. So they're baffled. In the Sanskrit, it says, Moga Asha, baffled in their hopes, Moga Karmana, baffled in fruitive activities, and Moga Jnana, baffled in knowledge. So the human form of life is meant to understand our relationship with Krishna, and those who are atheistic will be baffled in all aspects. People want meaning. And so scientism versus meaning. Right? To be in this world, there are those who, because we're trying to understand with our mundane mind and mundane intelligence, and even with our mundane senses, we talked about this last Sunday also, that we fall short, right? Trying to do everything through the scientific method. Scientism wants to explain everything, but it falls short. How does it fall short? Well, let's talk about metaphysical truths. I cannot scientifically show that I have a mind and all of your minds are different from my mind, right? Even the trying to understand consciousness is such a tricky thing when you even hear from different scientists who are trying to study consciousness. We know very little about consciousness. We really don't even understand how memory works or why we actually dream. What's the purpose of dreams? We have speculations, but we can't scientifically use the scientific method to show why all of this is happening. We can't even prove technically, scientifically, that how do we know the world wasn't created 5 minutes ago? This is rational that we understand that the world wasn't created 5 minutes ago, but using the scientific method, certain things fall short. Aesthetics. If you go to the Denver Art Museum or any art museum, there's so many different types of art. And we just went the other day, and my daughter and I, we were talking about different paintings that we liked and didn't like. But we can't scientifically show why certain aesthetics fill us up with hope and love and wonder, and then others don't. Whereas what a painting that I might not like, right? I personally, I don't really understand Jackson Pollock, but there's other people that value Jackson Pollock and they're buying his paintings for millions of dollars. And so this aesthetics, what is beauty? What is beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Scientific method can't show. Ethical beliefs, right? When we talk about ethics, scientific method cannot always show what is ethical, especially in terms of survivalism. And when it comes down to genes and so many things, we won't get so much into that, and then there's just unprovable statements that are in the scientific community that certain people believe so that they can build upon theories. And then you have theories upon theories upon theories, but then we see how after sometimes a year goes by and one scientific theory is kicked out, and all the other theories are also have to get reestablished in a different way. So scientism versus meaning. In this world, people want meaning. And this is why they're now showing in many polls and how people want meaning to their life. I mean, people don't want to be just kind of in a materialistic frame of mind. Most people want to understand, why am I here? Why is this creation here? And again, we cannot understand this through our senses, through our mundane intelligence and mind. As Brahma, the greatest living person, was baffled, we also get baffled, but we have help. And this is called Prastan Traya. Traya means three. Sthana, this is where we get the English word stand. And Prasthana Traya means three ways of using logic and reason through the revealed scriptures. So Nyaya Prastan, Nyaya means logic. And the Vedanta Sutra, which Srila Vyasadeva has written, uses logic and reasoning and very wonderfully debates the existence of God and shows quite philosophically how God is the source of everything. Then we have the Shruti Prastan, which is the Upanishads, which dives even more into the understanding of the Supreme Personality of God. And then we have the Smriti Prastan, which is Bhagavad Gita. So this goes back to our main evidence for God is scripture. And to have faith in Bhagavad Gita, to have faith in these words, just as there are people who have faith in seemingly unprovable ideas and theories in the scientific realm. And so Atta Shri Krishna Namadi Bhaved Grayam Indriya Sevan Mukha Hi Jivado Swayam Eva Spiratyada, that we're unable to actually use our mundane senses to see God. But by chanting the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, taking prasadam, hearing about Krishna, reading Bhagavad Gita, our senses become purified and we awaken our spiritual senses. This is even stated as Premanjana Charita Bhakti Vilochanena, that when one's heart and eyes are filled with love of God, then we can actually see the beautiful, inconceivable form of the Lord. And so, sure. And so this is the beauty of Krishna consciousness, to try to understand Krishna so that we're not baffled in this human form of life. And in the purport to text 12, Srila Prabhupada in the purport says, for such persons, cultivation of the knowledge in the Vedic literature, like the Vedanta Sutra and the Upanishads, is always baffled. So we can even study the scriptures and not come to the point of loving God. And this is a great struggle that we try to enter the scriptures with our, again, mundane mind and mundane intelligence. And so this is why we also have to properly hear from those who have understood the entire context and the entire, you could say, prastantraya. They've understood what the scriptures are getting at. Even in Srimad Bhagavatam, we see how Srila Vyasadeva, who wrote the scriptures and manifested them, he was baffled. He was not feeling that he had completed his work until he wrote the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in the Srimad Bhagavatam, what happens is he's revealing his entire heart through Bhakti Yoga. So we can even read Bhagavad Gita and different scriptures. But if we're not hearing from a pure devotee like Srila Prabhupada, then we can be baffled in some of the things that are being stated. And so this is why we have these classes, to dive deep into Srimad Bhagavatam. So I'll just read this last purport, that people jeer at Krishna because they are envious of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Their destiny is certainly to take birth after birth in the species of atheistic and demoniac life. Perpetually, their real knowledge will remain under delusion, and gradually they will regress to the darkest region of creation. But then, why is creation there? To give hope and love of God. And so, even though personalities who might be against God, by the mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, everybody has a chance to get out of this illusion. Nobody's going to be stuck in the material world forever. There's always hope and guiding light, especially when we take shelter of Srila Prabhupada's books. And so stop here. It's 5:56. If anybody has any questions or comments on any of the points that we discussed today.
Hey, thank you, Bala Prabhu.
Krishna.
I was talking with Charlie earlier at the temple today, and he was just sharing an observation of, behind Nrsimhadev on the cover of Ishopanishad, there's images of an Ananta Shesha. And so you were delving a little into the creation, efficient cause. Anyways, I just was going to ask if you could just elaborate a little bit on the significance of Ananta Shesha and just who he is and his kind of his significant role in relationship to the cosmic manifestation and our theology.
What did you tell him before?
Just real briefly, that expansion of Balaram and then coming as Lord Vishnu's bed. But I know in the 5th canto and different places, there's some further elaboration. We didn't go into it so long. So just, so just a very kind of brief overview. And his thousands of head eternally reciting glorification of the Supreme Lord, like that. And if there's some more further details as far as Ananta Shesha and you were discussing a little bit of just the cosmic creation, the avatars, and if you could expound a little further.
Yeah, Ananta Shesh, to speak about unlimited, some personality that's unlimited. So as we were speaking about energies, there's a certain energy called Adhara Shakti. So Shakti in Sanskrit means energy, and Adhara means to hold up. And so as Tushna was saying about Lord Balaram expands, well, he's the kind of the presiding deity of this Adhara Shakti, which is also called Sandini Shakti. And so as we talked about how Krishna doesn't have to directly do anything, he has expansions that does everything for him, even though they are him, but the moods are different. So all of these different manifestations of God, it's not that we're following polytheism, and we're technically not, in terms of the phrase anyway, monotheists, where some think even different, because all these different incarnations of God, they actually are God, just as you take one candle and you light other candles, and you can put that one candle in and they all look like they're the same candles. They have the same powers. And so Balaram, he is the presiding deity that manifests the spiritual world. And this energy also manifests the material world. All these energies, it's the manifesting, you could say, worlds that we experience, the different dimensions that we experience. And so Balaram, he expands as Ananta Shesh to be the resting place of Krishna and Lord Vishnu. He manifests in so many ways, and especially in this material creation, the energy of this Adara Shakti or Sandini Shakti is what we know as gravity. So the planets and everything within this universe is being held up by the energy of Ananta Shesh. And that's quite inconceivable, but yeah, as Tushta pointed out, and then as I said, it's, there's more that could be said, but maybe for this class. I hope that's okay. If Charlie, you had any kind of response or further questions about that, not to put you on the spot or anything, but if you feel free to say anything.
Only other question for right now. So first expansion, so the Ananda Shesh is above Vishnu, then does Vishnu come out of Balaram in some way, or just straight out of Krishna? Kind of separate creation.
Yeah, that's it's a hard one to answer because these forms are all eternal. So when we use when we use the language of this realm, that we're used to talking in terms of past, present, and future. In the eternal realms and the spiritual world, there's only the eternally present. So these forms are actually all eternally present, but they can manifest in the material world in a certain past, present, future tense. So it's, going back to that kind of understanding these spiritual terms and spiritual ideas. With the mundane mind, we get trapped with this past, present, and future.
All right.
Sorry, and not to confuse or anything, but it's a little tricky.
Also, Bala, I don't want to take over too much, but I just really appreciated your point about taking shelter of the holy name, and it reminded me of just the imagery of our acharyas, of all our predecessors, spiritual masters and teachers, who, when we hear of their practice, we see them, sitting under a tree, they're writing, they're with their japa mala, and they're just doing the practice as, like a classic, monastic practice. Why? Well, and how they're not just like intellectually just forcing them. It's not just like an intellectual force or an intellectual prowess only, but there's such humility and simplicity in their practice, and as you said, awaiting further revelation, along with being intellectuals and scholarly. And so I was just appreciating just in our Vaishnav line, how there's this aspect of the sadhana and the simplicity of the practice. And from that, especially with the holy name, the sincere practice of the holy name, further truths are revealed.
Yeah, that's a very important point about, the practice of chanting the holy name goes back to purifying the consciousness so that we can understand the higher realms and the higher things that are being presented. And then at the same time to use our intelligence, to use our logic, because that's also necessary. And everybody's going to be different. I think that's the beauty of spiritual life, is that there are those who are quite logical and philosophical, and they have the power to go deeper into certain aspects, but then might get tripped up in so many ways. And then there are those who have a simpler way of life. And this is quite beautifully illustrated in Srimad Bhagavatam in many ways, with the Brahmins' wives who were so simple. They were able to understand who Krishna was right away. Even Lord Brahma couldn't really understand Krishna. So many great personalities, they couldn't understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, even though they knew the Vedas. They could speak scripture and so many things. And so, it all goes back to that revelation and mystical life. Chanting the holy names, it's quite a mystical practice, and doing it year after year after year. Any prayers that you go deeper into, right? Bhakti is a universal, it's not sectarian. The Srila Prabhupada would point out, calling upon the names of God as Allah, Buddha, Jehovah, Jesus, all these beautiful names of God are infused with the Shakti of the Lord. And when we take shelter of these holy names, then there's deep revelation within the heart, because we're connecting directly with Krishna. I know, Tushta Prabhu, this, and Mother Nidra, the Vachya and Vachikam. You have the form of Krishna that we talked about, the different forms and manifestations, but more merciful than the forms and the forms of Krishna is the holy name of Krishna, because this holy name is none different than Krishna. And so to dive deep into the holy name and this mystical, very mystical, esoteric practice of chanting the holy name, it goes deeper and deeper and deeper. And really purifies the consciousness. Revelation happens in the heart. Any other comments or questions? And any points? All right. Everyone seems satisfied. So thank you for your kind attention. If I said anything proper, it's by the grace of Shisha Guru and Guranga and Srila Prabhupada. And thank you very much. Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Thank you, Bala Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Bhagavad Prabhu Ki
Hare Krishna.
Jai.
Jai.